Welcome to Bridging the Gap. I'm your host, Bria Baker. On this episode, we're celebrating LGBTQIA Pride Month with some of the brilliant artists behind High School Musical, the musical, the series, as well as activist, artist, and leader in the trans community, Toni-Michelle Williams. We're talking about the importance of authentic LGBTQIA representation on and off the screen.
I would love to see just more queer and trans leading players and get a glimpse of what their life looks like.
It's really empowering to get to be a part and see these characters and these storylines that I didn't get growing up.
It truly is deeper than visibility.
I'm so excited to be joined by Anne-Marie Pace, Toni-Michelle Williams, and Frankie Rodriguez. Thank you so much for being here, y'all.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome to the couch. So things right now are very challenging. We have a lot going on in our community, and it can be a lot. So just before we get into things, how are y'all feeling? What's coming up for you in terms of just staying grounded and proud and honest and authentic?
It's so important that we check in with ourselves and with our bodies. We know that what's happening around the world is just people are experiencing a high level of just not feeling safe, right? Not feeling safe in their communities, being over-policed, being over-surveilled. And so it's so important that we get back to where we're spending time with the people who see us and hear us and love us.
With a lot of things going on in the news and such, it can be a very heavy thing to take on. And I know sometimes hearing about things can take me back to like how I felt when I was in middle school and not out yet, and you know, just back to those very vulnerable feelings. But it's also a time to really lean on the community. Even like coming to this interview and just knowing that I would be with you all really made me feel safe and comfortable and excited to talk about issues that we need to talk about.
What about you?
I'm good.
Yeah, you good?
I think I right now operate from a place of just being aware and trying to just stay on top of as much as I can with what's happening and be informed. But also just for myself, I have to just have a sense of like optimism, just to be like, everything will turn out for the best. And just also trying to be that for just maybe kids that are looking to me for that, just that sense of safety, just to be like, no, like no matter what's happening in the world, you still can be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do and just find your true self and what makes you happy.
Any chance that I get to see a character that represents me on screen, it's always very comforting, and it does make me feel a little less alone. Growing up gay, anything that I was going through or thinking or feeling, because I didn't have a reference to look at that, sometimes it did make me kind of feel more isolated than everybody else. Now getting to play an openly gay character on a Disney franchise and have people reach out and say, your character gave me the confidence to come out to my family this week. You're kind of just like blown away, like, wow, that is having an impact on somebody. They could be across the world and they're still finding ways to relate to your character. And it's nice to get to be something that I always didn't get to see growing up.
I'd love to hear from each of you on what you feel is the value in bringing your authentic self, your own identities to the screen.
As an organizer and performance artist, it is so important that I bring all parts of me to the screen. I have the honor to lead an organization in Atlanta called the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative, aka SNAPCO. Yeah. We are a Black, trans, and queer-led organization really empowering trans and queer people to organize and to support us in shifting the culture in our city.
So that is a screen, and that is just as important.
Yes, we call it like not even being on the screen, but being in the trenches.
Yes,
And we need some cameras so that we can see what it's like being in the trenches.
Yes, I love it.
For me, it has always been bringing a sense of honesty. It's a little easier to just, when you're acting, of course, like you're trying to be as authentic and as honest as possible. And so I think the value for me is to be able to bring as much of myself to a character as possible.
When you're playing a character, you try to take on that role, but to make it real and honest, as you said,
Yeah.
you have to bring that part of you that is a real person.
Yeah, and I think that's what also makes it fun too, is that you're sharing bits and pieces of yourself, but also creating a character at the same time. But I think that's what also can give you an edge when you're like auditioning for something. If you're just bringing yourself to the character, it can like make it pop a little bit more, I think.
I agree.
In that way, like with Carlos on High School Musical, the series, I felt seen and represented as being Mexican, being queer, and just connecting to something that's very truthful, because Frankie does bring that authenticity to the character, and it makes all of us connect to it in a really, really cool and special way.
It's about connection, and it's also, for me, about being the invitation, right? Because what we're up to is transforming the culture of the way people see us, the culture and the ways in which people receive us, and to also receive our truths. And so being more authentic, being honest, being transparent really is the invitation for people to join us in that process of transformation.
I love that idea of an invitation. So the thing about having a small few characters that have to be representative is that they can't do it all. You know, they can't bear the brunt of expressing every LGBTQIA plus experience. But at the same, that leaves those of us who are in the community and have felt and experienced these things firsthand, wishing for more honest portrayals of the characters that we love or the people that we are. What are the aspects of your identity that you have not yet seen make it to a screen?
I mean, from an actor perspective, I want to tell every story possible. I want to say everything possible. I want to do it all, but it's really hard when you're confined into a part of this whole friend group. You get like a little sliver of a storyline, do you know what I mean? And I think that could really change, and you could really explore more if you kind of like put that type of character into the leading spotlight. I would love to see just more queer and trans leading players and get a glimpse of what their life looks like.
Yeah, that's so real. And then with that, you get more of their backstory. So you see what it was like for them to come out, what it was like for them to build community or to rebuild community, because it can be, at least for me, like I think some of the coming out stories are either like trying to be exclusively positive and optimistic to the point of being unrealistic in my opinion. I'm like, maybe some people got this kind of support, but that was not my experience. Or then it's like all bad and you never get to see the parts that are joyful of like, the exhale. You don't get the both and. It's like, I can either only be happy or only be angry. And most of the time, that queer character has to like hold down the fort of being always happy.
Always happy, or like always the conscious person, or always the one correcting everyone. I want to see more comedy amongst queer and trans folks that's not making mockery of our experiences and of our lives, but like that just is comedy. The things that we say, the references that we make, the singing out of the box randomly, you know, like, all of the comedy, the joy that's inside of our communities. I often see a struggle and or the queer trans character facilitating the struggle, right? And so I just want to see them exist. I also want to see more transformation happen and more apologies. Like when we talk about representation, there is nothing like seeing someone, especially if you've been harmed in a similar way, like to see that an apology is possible and that you like deserve that kind of moment of release and exhale. I want to see some like trans babies get some apology.
Yes,
I do.
I love that. And I think it is the invitation that you've been talking about. Because I think sometimes people are like, ooh, I'm better now, so let's just brush that under the rug and not talk about the times when I was homophobic and transphobic and in hurtful ways to you. But that idea of like, I'm inviting you to see what is possible when you are just outright and saying, I was wrong. And I had it wrong. And I now see differently and I can do differently and model it on screen in a way that invites families into that kind of conversation.
And it's so true of what you were saying of, you know, you feel the inauthenticity in characters when they are portrayed inauthentically. And a lot of that goes back to having queer storytellers tell queer stories and queer creatives and not even queer ethnicities, anything else of that experience. If you have a creative team that has lived that life and felt that experience, it will be fully thought out and fully fleshed out. And it's important to do, and it's important also to give those opportunities to many queer creatives, not just one or two, and just spread it out because all of us have something interesting to say. A queer creator that I really look up to is Tim Federle. He is the creator for the show High School Musical, the series. And he also directed and released a movie on Disney Plus called Better Nate Than Ever. Both of those are just perfect examples of what wholesome queer content can bring. And it's something that I definitely want to bring forward in all of my projects, which is telling these stories in such a personal place and bringing that vulnerability, bringing that authenticity to the stories. And Tim does that not only in his work, but also on set. He will start the day off, kind of bringing the crew together and explain that this is a set of kindness and openness, and everyone feels really safe to express themselves. When you have a cast and a crew that feels really accepted and heard, it very much translates across the screen.
Frankie, I love your character Carlos, and I want to hear a bit more about what it was like bringing that to life on High School Musical, the series.
It's awesome. Growing up, I feel like I was such a Carlos. Like, all I ever cared about was like Broadway and like how I was gonna get there and like what I was gonna do when I was there. And so to get to play that and bring myself into it, and I think it just adds like a layer of honesty, which makes it even more fun to play, because you're like, well, I've lived this situation before, so like I know how to like act this scene out, which is, nice and comforting.
I love that so much. That must be really surreal, actually.
It is a little wild.
Like
Like sometimes I'll read things and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this actually happened to me. Or like, I said this exact same thing. It's nice.
Yeah, no, it is nice. And you're doing such an amazing job at it.
Thank you.
And younger audiences are resonating with it. Is there something specific about Carlos? Or do you think it's just people being so thirsty for that kind of representation?
I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think obviously this was like, this is our experience and we grew up as like who we are, so we're kind of used to this thing. But I think some people are kind of like, oh yes, that's the story that I've been looking for. Like, I'm interested in this. Or just to have people that are like, oh yeah, that was my experience growing up, and it's nice to see that reflected.
Yeah. And so that must be so beautiful to hear from you, Anne-Marie, because you're a director on High School Musical, the series. So what is it like bringing yourself to your side of the storytelling process and then see it resonate so deeply?
Yeah, it's incredible, specifically for High School Musical, the series. It's such a safe place to work, and it's really empowering to get to be a part and see these characters and these storylines that I didn't get growing up. And when I directed an episode and I found out that it was a Carlos-specific episode, I don't even know if you know, but how excited I was to get to do it. And it was just so cool to get to see Frankie in so many different aspects. I was emailing him before and like sending inspirational videos back and forth to get prepped for the episode. And that episode also has, starts dealing with bisexuality and going into that, and that's very much my experience. And so the fact that I got to bring my own life experience to that story in that episode and those characters was really, really cool.
And then within that larger umbrella theme, like addressing bisexuality, but what are some of the more specific issues that you got to address and that were exciting for you to address?
One thing is just talking about bisexuality. It's something that hasn't been talked about for a long time. It's a part of the reason why I feel like it took me a while to come to my queerness, is because I didn't really know bisexuality was a thing, and that if I was having feelings for boys, that then it must mean that I'm not queer, or it was very confusing. And so I think to see characters going through that experience and sort of understanding where they fit in there and whatever else, just the visibility is everything.
Oh yeah, and the visibility of the messiness of it. Because I think sometimes when people see the letters LGBTQIA, like they think everyone neatly fits within a box in a letter, and that there's not any unique experiences happening within that. And so yeah, I very much relate to that of just, when I was first coming out, it's not just how you portray yourself to other people, but it's the internal conflict that you go through. And when you have no framing of what is appropriate versus what has been told to you is inappropriate, and you need to push back against it, and you're just like, okay, I don't know how to be honest about all of the thoughts going through my head, about the like back and forth I'm having, about whether other people are having that kind of back and forth. I'm seeing you not, yeah, you can relate. Is that something you get to portray through Carlos, or is Carlos someone that is so sure of himself and what he wants out of life that you don't always get to bring that?
That's one of the things I do love about playing Carlos, is just his sense of self, and like he understands what he's bringing to the table. It is also interesting to see these other characters go through these different types of things, because you're not just confined into a box of whatever letter you fall into. You know what I mean?
Right.
But again, it's like, well, what does that look like? What is that? I'm like interested. Do you know what I mean? And if it's like a door that can be open for more storytelling like that, then yeah, let's do it.
Yes, more of that. I want to switch gears just a little bit because we've been talking about some of the great examples of queer representation. And what I personally feel is that we still are lacking in trans representation, specifically of Black trans women. And Toni-Michelle, Black trans women have been on the front lines of the LGBTQIA civil rights fights. As a leader in the trans community, what kinds of stories do young trans girls need to see on screen today? Because I mean, the answer is probably all of the stories.
I mean, I'm like, all of the stories, everything. But we've always been fighting. We've been fighting, like you said, since Marsha P. Johnson, right? And even after Marsha P., there was Bayard Rustin, who was a gay Black man, right? Who literally led the entire March on Washington and created all of the back end work on it, right? And so we don't hear those stories. I'm ready to see transformation and like the power that trans women have to, you know, transform hearts and minds of people, because it is about those happy accidents of wholesome love, you know, that like really makes being in relationship and in connection with trans people so different. There's grace that happens, there's a joy, again, there's comedy, again, not comedy that is for the entertainment of other people, but just literally the comedy that exists in our conversations. I'm ready to see stories that honestly are not so...
Always serious, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel that.
I'm ready to see stories that aren't always so serious and that don't always end with the murder and or the isolation of a trans person. There are just stories of joy and satisfaction, being like baddies and boss people, boss girls that are literally existing. I'm living that truth. People attempt to disenfranchise Black LGBTQ people because simply they're afraid. They're afraid of losing their power, losing their privilege, and also losing their access to the resources that they have. I also believe that people are afraid of change and transformation. And the most magical thing about being trans and being queer is that we are able to see clearly sometimes on the other side of pain, on the other side of isolation. And we get there really fast because we have to. It is a part of how we're able to survive. I do what I do because I want Black trans women to have full lives, to live beyond the age of 35, and to have casual and intimate experiences that they deserve and that we deserve as women and as human beings who are, again, worthy of love.
So when you look at the LGBTQIA plus characters that you are seeing in media, in films and series, do you feel like they were written and made for audiences that include queer people, or do you feel like they are still more so speaking to straight and cisgender people?
It really just depends on what I'm watching. There are some things that I'll watch and I'll be like, oh, this was created by a queer person. And it's like, it can be consumed by anyone. It's just, you know, something that we're watching and it happens to be funny and moving and the story feels authentic. And then you can tell when it isn't. And you're just like, oh, okay.
So you feel like it's less who you believe the person is writing for and who that person actually is themselves.
Yeah.
Their positioning. That's interesting. What about you? Have you found it to be one way or the other?
I think it's absolutely a both and. As an organizer, I'm always trying to find the people who are looking for us, the people that's looking for the information and the people who are looking for the truth. So when you talk about like honesty and authenticity, right? It's like, what is the truth? And if people will be moved by this truth, those are the people that, you know, we're looking for. So I definitely even hear like, you know, what could be scary as a filmmaker, and then also just knowing that like as an organizer who's like constantly working to center the stories of the people who are most marginalized, that will come with education, right? That will come with more confidence and power and dignity for folks inside of that community. And so I enjoy watching things that are just truth-telling, because I can choose to opt in if that is for me and or not. And I love watching youth be really, really curious. like in like deciding if this is for them or not. And they have the capacity to do that.
Oh, yeah.
You see it all the time.
So Anne-Marie, I mean, for you as well, you're both seeing content, you're creating content. Do you find that it's still being built for queer audiences or that it's built for straight and cisgender audiences?
It all still goes back to who's creating it, who's writing it, who we're putting in the creator seat, who we're putting it in the writer's room. One of the special things about High School Musical, the series, is the creator is a queer man, and he gave me my first opportunity to direct an episode of TV and is reaching out to the next generation of queer directors.
And I love that y'all have been able to build that kind of relationship, supporting one another as part of the work that you're doing. And it's like, if I do want there to be more LGBTQIA plus storytellers, I've got to be a part of supporting that next generation. For each of you, what are messages that you hope that next generation of LGBTQIA plus people are receiving through your storytelling, through your work?
This is something that I have like told myself many times too, is that you accomplish so much more when you're just authentically yourself than you do trying to portray what you think other people want you to be. And I hope that's something people take away with, you know, anything that I do.
Yeah, we are not monolithic. You can be your full self and still exist and be beautiful and be loved.
The message that I want to leave with folks is that it truly is deeper than visibility, and that there is so much more than just being present and being there and representing a community, but it is about what you are shifting and shaking at the table, how you are interrupting and intervening, and how you are staying grounded in your own dignity. When you're at that table, that is so important and key. Not just letting people pull you out of a crowd and say, hey, but really study and learn, center those who are most marginalized, and share the stories of those who are marginalized. That is what we have to do when we get inside and we're representing our people.
Yes, yes. I love that you said deeper than visibility, because arguably, we have the most visibility that we've ever seen for the community right now.
And still
yet
under attack,
and still
right?
under attack.
So it's deeper than that.
I think an important message to send, especially with right now a lot of anti-gay legislation coming up, is that our best weapon as a queer community is just being ourselves fully, because this legislation, everything is trying to make us feel shame for being who we are. And so if the next, LGBTQ plus generation knows that that is a way to fight back. And I do think they already know that, because one of the most inspiring things to see was how many kids walked out of their school in protest. And that, I think, speaks more to the hope of our future than anything else.
Yes, oh my gosh, yes. Like, it was just like an immediate pushback, an immediate decision to say, I don't care what you think or what you're saying, we're gonna affirm our right to be here over anything. And to see the amount of allies that joined in and were a part of that, it's been so beautiful. And I think what I love most about what you said is the piece about shame. I'm just like, if young Bria was less ashamed, she would have come out sooner. She would have been a lot bolder and louder in that. And so I think the antidote to shame is pride. And we need that through not just visibility, but also real material change on the ground. And we need better storytelling, more storytelling that allows us all to be seen and heard in it. I love this. We could talk for days though, y'all. This has been incredible. Thank y'all so much for being here and getting so real about the importance of LGBTQIA plus narratives. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much.
Don't miss High School Musical, the series, now streaming on Disney+, and subscribe to the Disney+ YouTube channel for future conversations. Happy Pride Month, and we'll see you next time.